No one ever wakes up and realizes their nation has started collapsing. Decline is rarely loud. It does not begin with explosions, invasions, or dramatic speeches from palace balconies. Instead, it starts quietly, in places the public never looks, shaped by forces almost no one notices until it's too late. Every civilization believes it is permanent until one day, it isn't. And history shows us that the moment a nation feels invincible is usually the moment when the real danger begins. For thousands of years, observers have tried to explain why some nations rise to impossible heights while others crumble into dust. Geography, leadership, culture, resources, these are the explanations we hear in textbooks. But the truth is far more complex, far more uncomfortable, and far more mysterious. Some of the most powerful forces shaping the destiny of nations cannot be seen directly. They live in incentives, beliefs, demographics, social contracts, and invisible economic structures. They determine how people behave without people realizing they're being guided. And so, the real question isn't why nations fall, it's why they rise in the first place. What combination of hidden forces ignites their ascent, sustains their momentum, and ultimately turns against them? To answer this, we need to travel through time from ancient empires to modern superpowers to explore the quiet, often unnoticed patterns that decide the fate of entire civilizations. It begins with something surprisingly simple: the story a society tells itself. Every nation that rises starts with a story, a founding myth, a shared purpose, a belief that tomorrow can be better than today. These stories can be religious, political, economic, or cultural. But without them, no amount of wealth or military power can hold a society together. The Roman Empire united millions under the belief that Rome was the eternal city. The Abbasid Caliphate built its identity on knowledge, scholarship, and divine mission. The United States shaped itself around liberty, innovation, and opportunity. Japan rebuilt after World War II using a story of discipline, resilience, and national dignity. This collective story is the first hidden force. It's intangible, yet it dictates the actions of millions. It creates the social glue that enables cooperation at massive scale. But if this story weakens, or if people stop believing in it, everything built on top of it starts cracking. The second hidden force is demographics, not just population size, but the age structure, the values of different generations, and the balance between workers, dependents, innovators, and leaders. A nation with too few children loses its workforce. A nation with too many young people but too few opportunities faces unrest. A nation with an aging population faces stagnation. These patterns unfold slowly, invisibly, but they determine the entire direction of the economy before politicians ever enter the picture. And then there is the third hidden force, the incentive system, the invisible architecture of rewards and punishments that shape the behavior of elites. Nations rise when their most talented people are incentivized to build, innovate, and serve the public. Nations fall when those incentives shift toward extraction, corruption, and short-term gain. This is one of history's most reliable patterns. When the elite class becomes more interested in protecting their wealth than in expanding the nation's prosperity, decline becomes unavoidable. Let's see how these forces played out across history, starting with a civilization that seemed unstoppable, the Persian Empire. For centuries the Persians dominated the ancient world. They controlled vast trade networks, created innovative administrative systems, and ruled with surprising tolerance. But at the peak of its power, something subtle changed. The empire's founding story, unity across cultures, began to weaken as a more insulated aristocracy emerged. Generations of internal struggles eroded trust. Incentives shifted from service to self-preservation. Local governors began prioritizing personal wealth over public duty. And while the population was still large, it had become stratified, disconnected, and resentful. When Alexander the Great finally invaded, the Persian Empire did not fall because his army was overwhelmingly powerful. It fell because the empire had hollowed itself out from within, long before a single Greek soldier crossed the border. The collapse was simply the final step in a process already in motion. The same forces appeared in Rome. For centuries Rome thrived because it rewarded innovation, merit, and military discipline. Its founding story, the Roman spirit, was powerful enough to unite people across continents. But over time Rome's incentive system corroded. Wealth concentrated in fewer hands. Citizens who once served in the legions were replaced with foreign mercenaries loyal only to their paychecks. Birth rates collapsed. Political power became a commodity bought and sold in the Senate. The Roman story lost its magic, replaced with cynicism and decay. When the Western Empire collapsed, the barbarians didn't truly conquer Rome. Rome had already stopped believing in itself. The fall was merely the result of hidden forces that had been building for generations. Now, let's jump forward to the Industrial Revolution, a period when the hidden forces of rise and fall became easier to observe. In the 1800s, Britain was the workshop of the world. It dominated global trade, pioneered new technologies, and built the largest navy in history. But it wasn't simply machines or ships that made Britain powerful, it was the invisible alignment of incentives, demographics, and national story. The British population was young and rapidly urbanizing, feeding factories with millions of workers. The incentives for innovation were extraordinary, inventors became wealthy, industrialists became powerful, and bankers became global players. And the national story, the belief in British exceptionalism and global destiny, unified the country across classes. But by the early 1900s, these forces began to reverse. The working population aged. Industrial incentives slowed. Elite interests shifted toward preserving wealth instead of creating new opportunities. Britain didn't collapse dramatically, it declined gradually, losing industries, influence, and territory over decades. The United States, meanwhile, was rising because the very same forces favored it. A massive young workforce, abundant resources, and a powerful belief in the American dream created momentum like no other. But even the US is not immune to the patterns of rise and fall. In the 1970s, economic growth slowed, trust in government collapsed, and the national story fractured. Many historians argue that the US began experiencing early-stage signs of decline during this period. Yet the US also demonstrated something unique, the ability to renew its incentives. The technology boom of the 1990s revived innovation, reshaped industries, and temporarily restored national confidence. But the deeper hidden forces, demographics, inequality, and political polarization continued shifting beneath the surface. Today, we see similar patterns repeating in other parts of the world. China's rapid rise was driven by a demographic explosion, an export-driven incentive system, and a powerful national narrative of rejuvenation. But now its population is aging faster than any major society in history. Birth rates have collapsed. Debt has exploded. Local governments depend on land sales to stay afloat. Incentives are shifting away from innovation and toward state control. These hidden forces have already begun reshaping China's trajectory. Even countries considered stable, like Japan and Germany, face demographic crises so severe that their workforces may shrink by double digits within decades. Their national stories remain strong, but the population structure no longer supports sustained growth. So what exactly are these hidden forces? Let's break them down into the main categories that appear again and again. The first is demographic momentum. A nation's age structure determines everything from productivity to military strength to innovation capacity. When a country has more old people than young people, the economy slows, risk-taking declines, and political conflict rises. When a country has too many young people but not enough opportunities, unrest is inevitable. The second force is elite overproduction, a term coined by historian Peter Turchin. When a society produces far more educated elites than high-status positions, competition becomes vicious. People with advanced degrees and high expectations find themselves locked out of power. They become the intellectual backbone of political movements, protests, or even revolutions. The pattern appears in medieval Europe, in the late Ottoman Empire, in the Chinese dynasties, and now in modern democracies where millions of highly educated young people struggle to find stable, meaningful work. The third force is the state's fiscal health. Empires rarely die because they are conquered. They die because they run out of money. The inability to finance administration, military operations, infrastructure, and social programs leads to chaos. This is what ended the Spanish Empire in the 1600s, the French monarchy before the Revolution, and the Soviet Union in the 1990s. The fourth force is social trust. Societies rise when people trust each other enough to cooperate. They fall when trust breaks down and every interaction becomes a struggle for personal advantage. When corruption becomes normalized, when people believe the system is rigged, when institutions lose legitimacy, decline begins even if the economy looks strong on paper. Social trust is like oxygen, invisible, unnoticed, and essential. The fifth force is the national story, the myth, narrative, or purpose that gives people a sense of belonging. This story doesn't have to be objectively true. It only needs to be believed. Nations rise when they have compelling narratives. They fall when these narratives break apart or lose credibility. Now the question is, can nations control these forces? Or are they doomed to repeat the cycle of rise and fall? History suggests two answers. The first is that these forces operate whether leaders acknowledge them or not. They push societies forward or hold them back in ways that can't be fully controlled. But the second answer is more hopeful: nations can delay decline or accelerate renewal if they understand the dangers early. When societies recognize demographic risks, they can reform immigration systems, invest in families, or redesign their economies. When incentives become corrupted, governments can increase transparency, reform taxation, or break the grip of entrenched elites. When national stories weaken, leaders can create new narratives rooted in shared purpose. The challenge is that these solutions require long-term thinking, something many political systems struggle with. So what does all this mean for the modern world? Right now, we live in a period where multiple powerful nations are experiencing overlapping stresses. More than 60 countries have fertility rates far below replacement. Many are drowning in debt. Elite overproduction is widespread, with millions of graduates entering job markets that cannot absorb them. Social trust has collapsed in several democracies. And the national stories that once united people are increasingly contested. This doesn't mean global collapse is coming. But it does mean we are entering a period of transition, a rearrangement of global power shaped by the same hidden forces that reshaped ancient empires. We are already seeing surprising changes. Some countries, like India, Indonesia, and Nigeria, have demographic momentum on their side. Others, like South Korea, Italy, and Spain, are shrinking faster than predicted. Technological innovation is shifting wealth toward nations with strong scientific ecosystems, stable institutions, and high immigration. The nations that rise next will be the ones that understand the hidden forces early and adapt. And yet, in the end, the greatest force is the same one that has shaped civilizations for thousands of years: human belief. If people believe in their institutions, their future, and each other they build. If they stop believing, they retreat, divide, and cannibalize the systems that once made them strong. So what lessons can we take from this history? The first is that prosperity is not permanent. Nations rise not because they are destined to succeed, but because their institutions, incentives, and stories align at the right moment. When those forces shift, decline begins slowly, then suddenly. The second lesson is that collapse is rarely caused by a single event. It is the outcome of decades of hidden erosion, unnoticed until it becomes impossible to ignore. A financial crisis, a war, or a political breakdown is usually just the spark that lights the fire the fuel has been accumulating for years. The third lesson is that renewal is possible, but only when societies confront uncomfortable truths. Nations that adapt early, that reform institutions, rebalance incentives, restore trust, and rebuild their national story can delay decline or even spark a new rise. Japan's post-war reconstruction, South Korea's modernization, and the US technology boom are all examples of societies reinventing themselves after crisis. And this leads us to the final reflection: every generation must decide whether it will be a caretaker of decline or a builder of renewal. The hidden forces shaping the world are powerful, but not unstoppable. The future belongs to nations that understand them and citizens who demand long-term thinking over short-term comfort. If you found this breakdown thought-provoking, share your thoughts in the comments. Which countries do you believe are rising today, and which might be quietly heading toward decline? And if you want more deep dives into the forces shaping our world, consider subscribing. It helps more than you know.